Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the briefing. I have three things at the top, and then I'm happy to open it up for what I'm sure are a lot of questions today. And thank you for your patience in the time change. Just a quick trip wrap-up. Secretary Kerry concluded his fourth trip to Asia earlier today, has returned to the United States. I think they're in Honolulu right now on a stop back. He will join his family for Christmas and return to Washington after the holiday. Earlier today, he visited Tacloban in the Philippines to witness the post-typhoon reconstruction efforts. There, he announced an additional nearly $25 million in humanitarian aid from the United States. This additional assistance now brings the entire U.S. humanitarian assistance package to $86 million. The U.S. assistance will continue to provide food aid, shelter materials, clean water, and other items for families affected by the typhoon, as well as protection for vulnerable populations. The second statement I have at the top, we put this out earlier as a statement, but I just wanted to briefly mention it at the top, and then I'm sure there'll be some questions on this. This morning, we safely and successfully evacuated 3 groups of U.S. citizens from South Sudan. 2 Department of Defense C-130 aircraft and a private charter flight departed Juba at 0530, 0535, and 0940 Eastern Time, respectively, carrying non-emergency Chief of Mission personnel, private U.S. citizens, and third country nationals. We continue to urge U.S. citizens to depart South Sudan and will work to arrange for additional transportation as necessary to accommodate demand, of course taking into account security conditions and availability of commercial flights. The Department of State expresses our sincere gratitude to our colleagues at the Department of Defense for their critical assistance. As you know, we're deeply troubled by the recent fighting in South Sudan. Today, Ambassador Page met with President Kiir in Juba to discuss our concern about this violence, the increasing death toll, and growing humanitarian challenges. She also raised the arrest of several opposition members and called on the government to ensure their rights are protected. And I would note, finally, that we are encouraged by President Kiir's remarks today, welcoming dialogue going forward. Of course, that's what we're calling for. The third statement I have at the top, and then happy to take questions on all of this. Again, this just went out to all of you, but I wanted to highlight it again at the beginning, that today Secretary Kerry called Indian National Security Advisor Menon to discuss the December 12th arrest of Deputy Consul General, Khobragady. The Secretary understands very deeply the importance of enforcing our laws and protecting victims, and like all officials in positions of responsibility inside the U.S. government, expects that laws will be followed by everyone here in our country. It's also particularly important to Secretary Kerry that foreign diplomats serving in the United States are accorded respect and dignity, just as we expect our own diplomats should receive overseas as well. As a father of 2 daughters about the same age, the Secretary empathizes with the sensitivities we are hearing from India about the events that unfolded after the arrest, and in his conversation with National Security Advisor Menon, he expressed his regret as well as his concern that we not allow this unfortunate public incident to hurt our close and vital relationship with India. And with that, Deb, get us started.
I have several questions about the statement.
Which one?
The statement you just read about the Indian diplomat. First of all, you said he expressed regret. Mm-hmm. What did he express regret for exactly?
Well, I'm not
the
going to
treatment, the arrest in general.
Well, I'm not going to parse too much the words that were discussed in private diplomatic communications. He expressed regret with what happened. Again, as the father of 2 daughters about the same age, he empathizes with the sensitivities. Certainly, I'm not going to further parse what he said in a private conversation. But needless to say, it was a positive conversation, and we're focused on moving the relationship forward.
Also on the statement, it says here that Kerry expects that laws will be followed by everyone here in our country, and then it also says that it is important that foreign diplomats in the United States be afforded dignity and respect. Mm-hmm. It sounds to me like he's saying that because he doesn't think that they were. I mean,
again, I'm not going to further parse what we said or what he said. He's expressed regret at what happened, and he reiterated that we're focused on the way forward. I think what the general idea here is, obviously, particularly as a former prosecutor, we take very seriously upholding the rule of law. We're not saying that's not important. We're not saying that these charges aren't charges that we think, of course, we would need to enforce if in fact true. But what he was also saying is that as Secretary of State, We do think it's important for diplomats here and our diplomats overseas to be afforded, as we said, respect and dignity. Again, just as we want our diplomats to be afforded overseas. So he had the discussion with the National Security Advisor and again reiterated that we're focused on moving forward.
So does he think that she was treated with respect and dignity?
I'm not going to further parse what we said in the statement.
Okay, just one more thing real quick. What led the to the arrest? The arrest, do you know?
What led to what
led
the charges were?
Yeah, what led the diplomatic security to make the arrest, you know?
Well, it was a result of being charged with something. Hold on, let me.
How were they? Were they just executing a like a warrant to get her, or were they actually making the arrest, right? So they must have had a reason to.
Well, I said yesterday, we notified the Indian Embassy in September that there were allegations against this person involving some of these issues. So they knew back in September that we, the U.S. government, and obviously this is a Department of Justice issue and a District of New York, Southern District of New York issue, about the charges that were eventually filed against the Deputy Consul General. And that's, of course, as a result of those charges, why she was eventually arrested.
Did you have any reply from the Indian Embassy about your communication with them in September?
I can double check on that. I'm not sure.
Couple things on this.
There's, I'm sure, a lot on this. We'll get to everyone.
I wanted to ask also why Secretary Kerry called the Indian National Security Advisor particularly and not his counterpart.
I can double check if there was a reason. He has a relationship with a wide range of Indian officials. I'm happy to check if there was a
wondered if it was
specific
anything to do with some of the measures that were taken yesterday, including removing the concrete blocks from in front of the...
I honestly wouldn't read anything into it. I'm happy to check what the reason was, but as you know, he talks to a range of officials, and we've spoken to a range of officials. Just this morning, Undersecretary Sherman spoke with Foreign Secretary Singh to convey our understanding of Indian displeasure at this incident and our expectation that Indian government agencies will continue to fulfill their host government obligations regarding the safety and security of our personnel and mission premises. So obviously we're talking at a number of levels to a number of folks.
There are reports, and we have Indian sources telling us that the Indian government has transferred the diplomatic question from the Indian consulate in New York to the Indian mission at the United Nations. To your knowledge, is that true, and does that require any kind of approval on the part of the State Department, or can they just do that if they wish to?
Well, we've seen these media reports, but we at the State Department have not received any official communication regarding a possible change of credentials. In terms of the process, if and when such a request is made to the UN, it would be made to the UN Secretariat, who would then inform the Department of State. If, again, such a request is made, which we have not received any communication on such a request, it would have to be reviewed by all appropriate authorities at the UN and at the Department of State. It's not an automatic thing by any means, but again, we haven't received such a request.
So you would have to sign off on it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's a yes.
Yes.
Great. And then
There's
secondly,
a process.
yep, I get it. Mm-hmm. And then would her transfer to the Indian mission to the United Nations alter her immunity status?
Going forward or in the past?
Both.
I can double check on the specifics. Again, since no request has been made to us, I don't know what that would look like in practice, and I don't want to get into a hypothetical here. I'm happy to check on that. I've been very clear about what her diplomatic status was at the time of the arrest and currently is, which is, of course, consular immunity. I'm happy to check if it would change it.
There are also reports and Indian sources saying that she would have full diplomatic immunity were she transferred to the Indian mission to the UN. And her lawyer, her American lawyer, has said in public that that would give her, that would apply retroactively to any alleged crimes she may have committed in the past. I find it a little hard to believe that someone could be granted ex post facto immunity. So that's particularly my question. I realize it is hypothetical in the sense that, but I'm sure that the State Department lawyers could address that question of a change of status leading to retroactive immunity.
I'll check and see, but again, as we have received no official notification, there's no changes in respect to her immunity status. But I'm happy to check the hypothetical.
Principal, if somebody got it. Thank you.
Yes,
Marie, a few questions. Did Secretary Kerry in this conversation receive any assurances? You said it was positive. So did he walk away feeling like U.S. diplomats in India will be protect it.
Well, that's certainly what we conveyed, what Undersecretary Sherman conveyed. I think he walked away from the discussion with squarely focused on where we go from here and moving the relationship forward. That's why I said it was positive. Obviously, we don't want this to negatively further impact our bilateral relationship. Secretary Kerry wanted to directly engage on this with the Indian government, and I think that's how I would describe what he walked away from it with, and we have no reason to believe that they didn't as well.
Because there have been very specific threats made by Indian politicians, maybe not, the leader of the country itself. However, those in positions of influence and power have threatened retribution, retaliation against Americans.
Yes, and we, of course, believe that those have no place at all in this discussion. We made very clear that the Indians have to uphold their obligations, both on security. Also, we don't believe they should undertake any steps that prevent diplomats from doing their job, right? We've talked about some of the demarches and what those might have included.
And can I just clarify?
Yeah.
Is this statement is an expression of regret an apology?
I'm just going to use the word regret. I know people really focused on what words we're using and why we use what words, but I think the Secretary was very clear that we regret what happened here and that we're focused on moving forward. I don't believe he used that exact word, but was very clear, again, about personally the notion that as the father of two daughters, he regrets what happened, and as the Secretary of State, who's responsible for our diplomats all over the world, he wants to focus on how we move forward.
What exact word? Regret or apology?
Regret. The
You're not
statement
sure
says
if he used
regret.
that exact word?
No, the statement says he expressed regret. That exact word I can tell you.
Great.
Could you on this point, you said that he, as a parent, is that what you said?
As the
a
father of two daughters who are about the same age.
So, I mean, a lot of those that break the law have parents and have fathers and so on, but they still break the law. So is he saying that I, as a father, don't like to see this person who has a father arrested? Is that?
That's not what I said, Saeed. You're putting words in my mouth
No,
and in
I'm
his
just
mouth.
I'm trying to
What
understand.
what I said first actually was that obviously the U.S. All laws of the U.S. have to be respected by everyone who's here, diplomat or not. That's point A. And certainly as a former prosecutor, he feels very strongly about that. He was speaking about the overall situation and what transpired and expressing his regret at that. I'm not going to further parse his words, but suffice to say the point of the conversation was to focus on how we move forward. Yes, Catherine, we'll get to everyone on this, I promise.
To pick up on a question that Joe asked in response to this letter that the State Department sent, if you could check into what the response from
If
the
there was a
Indians,
response?
if there was one, but also,
And that was September 4th. I don't know if I gave you the exact date
4th,
yesterday. That was September 4th.
but also now obviously the Secretary is expressing regret. One would assume that the State Department and the Indian Embassy would maybe work in the meantime between September 4th and December, I think it was 12th of this arrest, to try to avoid this, this incident that you're now expressing regret for.
Let me be clear about what on September 4th we advised them of. It's State Department policy to advise foreign missions of allegations made involving a member of a mission or a family member. So we did so. We advised them of this on September 4th. But again, that's separate, entirely separate from the law enforcement process that is an important one of looking into these allegations. And then if the Department of Justice and the Southern District of New York think there should be charges brought, obviously that's a totally separate process from our diplomatic notification when there were allegations brought forward.
Why was
Okay, and then we'll get back to you guys.
Why was this decision actually made to arrest this diplomat?
It was based on charges that had been filed in the Southern District of New York.
So it was purely because the charges had been. When were the charges filed? I'm sorry, I should know that, but I don't.
I believe it was the. Yeah, I think it was the. Let me double check on the exact date. But obviously, this was just a response to charges that had been filed.
But I think, to follow up on Joe, I think one of the questions that we're circling around is, since DS was the arresting agency,
Because of
of her position,
Uh-huh.
Others in her position, even if they are junior, are sometimes given the opportunity, as her lawyer would say, to turn themselves in. Why the choice to arrest in front
I can
of
double check. And
schools
honestly,
like DS?
I can double check with our folks and see what the exact logistics of it were and why. I honestly don't
And
know.
I guess in the letter, in the letter that you wrote on September the 4th, was the Indian Embassy warned that their diplomat could face arrest on these charges?
I don't have the text of it in front of me. We notified them that allegations had been made. I think it probably goes without saying that if allegations are made and we're looking into them, consequences could come. I don't have the exact text. I'm happy to see if I can get it. Yes, I'm going to go back to you guys, and then I'm going to come back around. Go ahead. No, I'm going to go behind you, and then I'm going to come around. Yes.
Thank you.
Oh, I'll get to
Let
it. Go
him-
Way
ahead.
back before September,
Uh-huh.
in June or July, the Indian Delhi High Court issued a arrest warrant against the maid, and this request was made to the State Department, also the Department of Justice. What effort, what attempt was made to follow the court's orders issued in Delhi to get back the maid back to Delhi?
I know you asked about this yesterday. I don't have any more information for you about.
Receive any communication from the Indian Embassy on this?
I don't know. I mean, not that I know of, but that doesn't mean we didn't. Let me check again with our folks and see what we may have received. I just don't have any more information on that. I know you'd asked about that yesterday,
The
but
Indian
all the
gov-
information I have starts in September.
Okay, secondly, the Indian government today also accused the US of indulging in visa fraud by helping the maid to get out of the country and the family, whereas they were charged of serious offenses inside the country in Delhi. What effort has been made? Do you agree
Well,
with the
you-
charges?
Well, again, U.S. officials have been in contact with the complainant and her family, who would be this person you're referring to, as part of their investigation into this ongoing U.S. law enforcement matter. I can't comment on the substance of that contact, but I want to stress that all authorities have followed and are following all laws and procedures, certainly related to this issue and any other issues as well.
And on the phone call, where was the phone call made from? From the plane or
Where
from
from the plane?
from the plane?
Landed in Honolulu?
That's my understanding.
According to the media report, and the Indian police removed concrete security barriers outside U.S. Embassy in New Delhi on Tuesday. It's a kind of retaliation for the treatment of this issue. I mean, is it State Department response any?
Well, as I said, Undersecretary Sherman and others have made clear to the Indian government that they need to uphold their obligations to protect our security. I'd note a few other points. We welcomed a statement from the Ministry of External Affairs that India is fully committed to ensuring the safety and security of all diplomats in Delhi and elsewhere, and that they fully intend to fulfill their Vienna Convention obligations. So we'll keep talking to them about it and working on this moving forward.
According to the report, that because she was strip searched, so may I confirm that? Is it legal for as a kind of diplomatic, foreign diplomat here in the United States? May I confirm
Well, I
this?
believe that the U.S. Marshals spoke on the record to this last night, and if they have anything additional to add about that, I'd refer you there.
Just follow. That
And then
was-
you're next, I promise.
That kind
I'll
of
go to
normal
everyone.
behavior is for the criminals, right? And not for the diplomats. Is this the kind of treatment you give to the foreign diplomats? You treat them on par with the criminals, hardcore criminals?
Well, again, I'm not going to speak to those specifics. I think they put out an on-the-record statement last night about their process and their procedure, and if they have anything additional to add, I'm happy for them to do so. Again, what we're focused on right now is what I said today about the Secretary's conversation and about where we go from here. If they have anything specific to add, I'm happy for them to. Wait, you're next.
I have a few points. First is that India had asked for an unconditional apology. You are using the word regret. Did the NSA Menon accept the regret?
I'm not going to further detail their conversation. On our side, we've said it was a positive conversation. I believe folks on the Indian side may have now as well. And what we're focused on is moving forward. And I do think it was a good opportunity for the Secretary to very directly express his regret and talk about where we go from here.
The Secretary made two points in his from your readout. One was on laws and the other was on diplomats. Laws, obligation to follow. That were followed really to the, hill. And the second one, diplomats, the Secretary said accorded respect and dignity, just as we expect. Was that accorded? If not, whose fault is it?
Again, I think I already got asked this question. I'm not going to further parse what I read out in terms of what the Secretary conveyed to the National Security Advisor. Clearly, he expressed regret with what happened here, broadly speaking. We're continuing to look at exactly what transpired to see what exactly was done and are focused on, of course, moving forward with the relationship.
So have you heard anything further on this from the Indians? Because there is a list of things they have done. They have removed the barricade. They have, with Christmas coming, they have stopped the import of liquor and food. There's this, detail. They are asking for details of Have you provided the details of salaries of domestic help for the U.S. Diplomats?
Well, as I said yesterday, we've received several demarches from the government of India. I'm not going to get into the substance of them, but we've been very clear that we believe our diplomats should be allowed to continue with their jobs. They should not be impeded from doing them in any way by any of these actions. That's what we're focused on. The conversations continue at high levels, clearly, and we'll keep having them going
Can you
forward.
just explain how giving details of salaries of their domestic help impedes their jobs?
I'm not going to speak to specifics that have been out there rumored that we're potentially in one of these demarches. I'm just not going to get into the specifics. Yes, in the back.
So you referred earlier to when the allegations were made known to the Indian side, and then when the charges were later filed. So when the charges were filed, why was she not given the option to surrender instead of being arrested?
Again, that was the question Margaret asked. I don't have those details about how that exactly transpired. I'm happy to check into that and see if there's more I can share.
Okay, and a quick follow-up. Did you say that you would come back on the question of whether immunity would change when if she switches from consular to diplomatic status?
I said I would check into that hypothetical. As of right now, there's no change in her immunity status because we haven't received any kind of communication like that.
So has there never been a past precedent where charges have been leveled against faced by a diplomat and their immunity status has changed?
I don't know. I'm happy to check in with our. I mean, never ever is a big question, but I'm happy to look and see if there's some sort of precedent. I just don't know. Yeah.
You've been very clear about the difference between diplomatic immunity and consular immunity, but it's my understanding that consular immunity may still protect consular officers from detention. There's a section of the State Department website that says, although foreign career consular officers enjoy limited immunity from jurisdiction, Article 41 of the VCCR does grant them personal inviolability. Therefore, such individuals may not be arrested or detained pending trial, except in the case of a grave crime and pursuant to a decision of a competent judicial authority. So, were the standard procedures followed in detaining this consular officer? And it seems that a judicial authority would have to sort of initiate that.
Well,
Do
that
the
would
charges being filed constitute that?
Certainly not. We wouldn't be the judicial authority that would speak to that. It would be the Southern District of New York, I think, the Department of Justice, or of course the U.S. Marshals who were involved in this as well.
But does consular immunity, not diplomatic immunity, but consular immunity, protect someone from detention except in the cases of
Well, and I can
grave
check in terms of what this charge she was charged with, where that falls into that rubric. I'm not familiar with every single part of the State Department diplomatic immunity code. I'm happy to look into it and talk to our experts and see exactly why this case was handled as it was. But again, and these are important questions to answer, we're happy to do more digging on it. We're focused here in finding out exactly what happened and on how we move forward because we don't want this isolated episode to negatively impact our relationship.
Just a quick one. It's been 2 days since I've been asking about that. Did the State Department give a go-ahead for this operation? Were all
What
these
operation? What are you referring to?
the operation to arrest the?
Well, we were the arresting. The diplomatic security was the arresting authority here. Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
Yes.
the whole procedure was followed that should have been followed.
Again, we're looking into what happened right now on all parts of it. We aren't responsible for every part of this process. We had a limited responsibility for one part of the process. Exactly what we're doing right now is talking to other agencies and other folks to tease out the details of exactly what happened. We've been very clear that we played a role in this, and that's why we want to get more details, certainly about what our folks, but other folks did as well.
Can we expect an answer on that?
We're looking into it right now. Obviously, it's complicated, involves a bunch of different folks, but as soon as we have something to say further on it, I'm happy to. Saeed? Yeah. I think there's probably more on this, yeah. And then, yes, we can.
On the phone call, do you know how long the phone call lasted?
I don't.
And on the regret on what happened in New York and what happened in Delhi?
Regret on the situation writ large, I would say both, honestly. He certainly expressed regret about what happened with this case. Writ large, sort of how this is all played out. But I think part of it, of course, was focused on the fact that we don't believe that there should be steps taken in Delhi or elsewhere in India by the government to prohibit us from doing our work, to put restrictions on our work, some of the things we've talked about with the demarches. It was really about the whole situation, honestly, and focused on how we move forward.
So it was not about this arrest.
It was about, I said about what happened. Take,
No,
that, take whatever you will from that.
There are a
Don't
lot
shout,
of things.
please.
One
I'll
minute.
get
There
to
are a
you.
lot of things happened. One was the arrest. Then she was strip searched, and he
I'm
mentions.
not going to further parse what that means.
No,
The
because
secretary
he-
expressed regret about what happened in this
No,
situation.
no, he mentioned his daughters, so that becomes a personal touch, and that.
Absolutely. As I said, as the father of two daughters about the same age, but also as the nation's top diplomat who's responsible for the safety and security and treatment of our diplomats around the world, this is an issue Secretary Kerry feels very strongly about. Wanted to personally engage on it at a high level, wanted to express regret about what happened, and wanted to reiterate that what we're focused on is moving the relationship forward. Yes, in the back. Shouty McShout, yes.
On
Yes.
Vienna Convention, does the Indian government has taken several steps after this event? Does any of them, do you think, is in violation of Vienna Convention, or they are not?
Well, we've certainly told them they shouldn't take any steps that are. They have to uphold all of their obligations, and we'll keep talking to them about the specifics.
You are reviewing or questioning, or these questions are related to the procedures.
We're having conversations with the different folks that were
Okay.
involved. Yeah.
Do you have any doubt about the charges? Are you reviewing it or not?
No, not to my knowledge. Certainly, that would be a Department of Justice question. That's not what I was referring to that we were reviewing. What we're looking at and having conversations about is what transpired in terms of the arrest and what happened afterwards.
You were not
We're not
asked,
reviewing the charges to my knowledge.
but
that's
you're-
not really a question for me.
No, I mean, I'm just at. You were not asked by Indian government to review the charges.
I can't speak for what the Indian government has or hasn't asked us. I'm not privy to all of those conversations, but we're talking with them about how to move forward from here. Yes, in India still?
As to the procedures that were followed during the arrest itself, I'm aware obviously that's the US Marshals' responsibility, but they've indicated that the arrest was in accordance with their procedures. They were happy with what happened. How does the State Department feel about that? Because clearly this has caused such a huge diplomatic problem for you guys. Should there not be a review of those procedures?
Well, I think I've said very clearly that we're doing that right now. We're looking into exactly what happened, not just us, but the other folks, including the marshals that were involved. I think I'll let them speak for their own agency and their own procedures. But I do think that Secretary Kerry was very clear when he expressed regret at what happened. That includes multiple steps in this process, right? And going forward, we're focused on looking at what happened and not having another unfortunate episode like this happen.
You are unhappy with the procedures followed by the US Marshals?
The Secretary very clearly expressed regret about the whole situation. I'm not going to further parse what that might mean. Yes, in the back. Yes.
Can I? Okay, low volume.
See, and I call on you. Yes.
So you indicated earlier that the U.S. would probably have to sign off on the transfer to
Not
the UN.
probably. We would the UN and the U.S. both. Yes.
Right. So under what authority would that be? Because in a sense, this is India reassigning its diplomat from one posting to another.
Well, it's my understanding. Let me double check with our experts on this. That when a diplomat's posted to the United States, right, there's a process. Just like when we're posted somewhere overseas, there's a process in terms of them accepting your posting and all of that, and giving you immunity, which is we're the ones who would give immunity. So I think that's a credentialing process, right?
But on that, in a sense, they're moving. If this happens, she would move to another entity. She's moving to the UN, which is not the U.S.
But still as a diplomat in the United States.
But
U.S. missions to the UN are technically in New York.
Right, but
the UN is technically international property, but the missions are in New York.
Yes, but the immunity that flows from being in the UN comes from the UN's authority.
I can double check on the specifics. Again, they would be the ones that have the lead in the credentialing process and how that would work, but we do have a role to play in it. I'm happy to get more details on that, but again, it's a hypothetical because we haven't received any communication to that effect.
Maria, as
yes,
part of-
Lucas, wait, Lucas hasn't got a question yet.
Secretary Kerry personally sign off on the arrest?
I don't think that's how it works. I'm happy to check. And sign off officially, or I don't even,
Was he aware
in
that
any
the arrest
way?
was going to take place?
He was certainly aware, yes, absolutely. He's been kept up to speed on this case. I can double check on exactly how it works.
The last one.
How the process works, I just don't
So
know.
he approved the arrest?
I can double check on how it works because I don't know has official approving authority. Yes, wait, and then I'll come up to
Now,
Jeff.
did you see the statement that came out from the spokesperson of the Ministry of External Affairs today? He was asked, there was some Q&A, and he said there seems to be a difference between the understanding about the Vienna Convention. because he says we understand our obligations and our rights under the Vienna Convention, and we will implement them fully, and also ask for their implementation fully. So actually, what we are getting in Delhi that they feel that the U.S. has not been fulfilling its obligation under Vienna. Do you have a comment on that?
We fulfill all of our obligations. Yes, I don't believe that we would. I mean, there's no indication that we haven't in this case or any other. So I'm not exactly sure what he was referring to. Yes, Joe's been waiting.
Sorry, I just wanted to check on the credentialing process.
Let me go back to that.
If you are changing her status, which would, to me, imply a change of visa nomination, does that mean that one of the criteria is whether she has any charges pending against her in the United States?
I don't know the answer to that. I can double check on that. I just don't know. Obviously, the UN plays a big part in this process if that's where she would be credentialed to. So you should probably check with them about their processes, and I'm happy to check on our end as well.
But you'd be granting the visa, so...
I don't know if it's a visa. I don't have that in front of me. Let me double check. What I've seen is that when such a request is made, the UN Secretariat informs the Department of State, would have to be reviewed by appropriate authorities and the Department of State. I don't know if that involves a visa. I don't know exactly what that includes. I'm happy to check. Yes, Arshad?
So
And then Chris, I'll go to you next.
Jay Carney, in his briefing today, said, quote, "We're looking into the intake procedures surrounding this arrest to ensure that all standard procedures were followed and that every opportunity for courtesy was extended," close quote.
I agree.
Is it, I mean, you've been looking into this since last week, I think. Do you think that every opportunity for courtesy was extended?
We're still looking into it. There's just a lot of facts to gather here. We want to make sure we know all of them, talk to everyone involved. We're still looking into it.
And how long was she in the custody of DS before she was handed over to the Marshal Service?
I can double check. I don't know. Chris, wait. I said Chris is next, then you're next, yes.
On the process of ascertaining everything that happened, can you maybe go into a little bit more detail about what that entails? Does that mean you're talking to the marshals who handled this detention process, and have you spoken with this diplomat?
I don't have any specifics to read out in terms of what those conversations look like. I'm happy to check with folks and see if there are. We're talking to the different players that were involved in different parts of the process.
Do you plan to reach out to her?
I can double check and see if there are any plans on that.
Okay.
Yes.
And would you tell us when this review process is over, what the outcome of the review process was?
Absolutely. When we have more to share about our conversations we've been having, I'm happy to do so. Wait, Saeed, we need to finish this.
And do you think this entire process has derailed the strengthening of bilateral ties between the two countries? You know, Prime Minister was here, Foreign Secretary was here day before she was arrested. There was a huge, long series of talks being going on between the two countries.
Not at all. And our hope, certainly, and what the Secretary conveyed today, is that it doesn't. There are too many important issues that we work on together. We do have a very close, vital relationship. As you said, all you have to do is look at the meetings the President and the Vice President and the Secretary have had with our Indian counterparts to really demonstrate how important this relationship is. That's why we don't believe this isolated episode should further hamper our efforts to work together, and that's why we're focused on moving forward here in the back.
Yes or no? Is this the highest level of Indian official the U.S. has spoken to or has contacted, NSA?
On this issue?
Yeah.
I don't know technically in the Indian hierarchy where the Foreign Secretary is compared to the National Security Advisor. They were both spoken to today by senior State Department officials. I don't know of any other contacts.
Spoken to mean Foreign Secretary also?
Yes, Undersecretary Sherman today, as I said a little while ago.
Yeah.
Let me pull this back up.
Okay,
spoke with Foreign Secretary Singh this morning.
Okay,
Foreign Secretary, not the Minister of External Affairs, however.
Correct, yes, with
Thank
Foreign
you.
Secretary Singh.
Okay.
Yes, in the back.
Yeah.
Very back.
So again, while you're checking on that hypothetical about the consul, about the credentialing, could you also please clarify whether this is only about the U.S. signing off on her getting a potential UN credential, or also do you have authority, or are you involved in her exiting her consular immunity or her consular position?
I will double check on all of that. Again, this is a total hypothetical at this point, but I'm happy to check and see what in general is about here. Nicole, yes.
I'm just curious about standard practice. If you have a foreign diplomat on U.S. soil who has knowingly broken U.S. laws and lied to the federal government about it, is there any precedent for that person continuing to serve?
That's a good question.
Does that disqualify them somehow from, like, in terms of the agreement you have with their country or any country?
It's a really good question to which I don't know the answer to either. I'm happy to check with our folks and see if there is any precedent and how that would impact anything. Again, at this point, she's only been charged. There's a judicial process, of course, but I'm happy to check. Okay. Anything else on India? Syria. Yes, Saeed can
Syria. Ambassador Ford today gave an interview with Al Arabiya Network, and he said that the Islamic Front turned down a request for a meeting. Could you please explain the situation to us?
Yeah, we've said we're open to a meeting. I'm not going to further get into the details of the back and forth with the Islamic Front. As we've said, we have not met with them, but would not rule out the possibility, of meeting with them in the future.
Just so we can understand this properly, you reached out to them for a meeting, and they actually said, no, we don't want a meeting.
I'm not going to further detail what Ambassador Ford said. Clearly, we've said we're open to it, and we have...
What he said.
Right, and I'm not going to further detail it or explain it.
But you can't take us through, although it is in, it's in
I'm
the
not going
past.
to take you through the detail, how we schedule meetings and how we decide on what meetings to do when.
How does that impact whatever interlocutors that you might have, like General Idris or others and so on?
How does
How
what
it
impact?
in terms of having contacts with the other opposition groups? Does that stop
We've
you?
long met with a broad swath of the opposition. We've been very clear about that. But at the same time, that doesn't impact or change our support for General Idris and the SMC. We've been very clear about that as well.
Do you believe that the fact that they turned down a meeting with the United States of America in a way hinders the process for Geneva II?
Again, we said we're open to meeting with them. We meet with a broad swath of the opposition. Ambassador Ford's on the ground meeting with folks now. I believe he's still there. And we're tracking towards Geneva II. Again, this end of this week, we have a trilateral in Geneva with the Russians and the UN to make progress on all of these issues around Geneva II.
Everything is in motion for the 22nd of January for Geneva II to take place. Nothing has changed.
Nothing has changed. We know this is a hard process. Nobody's naive
Right,
about
right.
that. But things are certainly moving. We'll see what comes out of the trilat. Anything else on Syria? In the back, Michelle.
Yeah, Marie, why do you think Ambassador Ford made sure to make this point that the Islamic Front didn't want to meet with him?
I think he was giving a broad interview about the state of play right now and what we're doing and where we're going, and I don't think there was a particular reason. But we said very clearly we meet with a broad swath of the opposition. We're open to meeting with the Islamic Front, just don't have anything to announce at this point.
A follow up on this, Islamic Front has rejected the idea of negotiating with Assad and saying that anyone who does is a traitor. Do you think this statement will affect the participation of the Syrian opposition in Geneva II? And what if the Islamic Front doesn't want to go to Geneva II? What will happen then?
Well, we've been very clear in all of our conversations with the opposition that the opposition needs to be represented by a wide-ranging representative delegation at Geneva to give it, exactly as you, I think, are alluding to, the best chance of success. So one of the conversations that's going on within the opposition right now is what their delegation will look like. When they have something to announce, I'm sure they will, but we've encouraged them throughout this process to try and bring more folks in and to try and get a representative body to Geneva II for exactly that purpose.
At this point, are you confident that Geneva II will be held in January 22nd?
I mean, I think that's what Saeed just asked. We're certainly working towards that. We have a trilateral meeting this week where more planning will go on, and we'll see what comes out of that meeting. Syria? Samir?
Well, what will happen if the opposition is not able to have a wide representation of the Syrian people? Will you hold Geneva II without them?
Well, I don't want to venture to guess what various scenarios might look like. We're going to Geneva this week to sit down with the other folks and talk about the process and getting people to the table. We're talking to the opposition about it right now. I just don't want to, entertain different scenarios that we just haven't seen happen. We'll see what the opposition comes up with in terms of their delegation. Yes.
Update on the Syrian Kurds. PYD leader is in Moscow today. Do you know the latest status, their participation at Geneva?
I don't. I'm happy to check with our team.
Could quickly follow up.
Yeah.
Is it conceivable to hold Geneva II if the neighboring countries want to attend, if the P5 want to attend, if a whole host of people want to attend, including Iran and Turkey and others and so on, but the opposition does not want to attend? Is it conceivable to hold it?
Well, I'd make a few points. The first is that haven't made decisions on external participation yet. That's one of the issues that's on the table to be discussed at the trilateral. The opposition has said they support the Geneva Communique. They've talked about the Geneva II process, so that hasn't changed to my knowledge, and we know it's very hard to do, but that's what we're all working towards right now. Yes?
More on Syria. There was a report yesterday, I believe, that the Western diplomats now are open to President Assad staying in the power for the next year.
That report is completely false. I can say categorically. We have a long-standing position that has not changed. Assad must go. We've said very clearly that given the blood he has on his hands, he has no place in the future of Syria. I would point you actually to the press statement issued after the most recent London 11 senior officials meeting on Friday, states clearly, quote, Assad will have no role in Syria as his regime is the main source of terror and extremism. We remain, of course, firmly committed to the Geneva II negotiations implementing the Geneva Communique, which says we need mutual consent from both sides to form a transitional government, which, of course, the opposition would never permit to include Bashar al-Assad.
Removing of the chemicals from Syria, there were again some reports that the timetable might be postponed. I don't know if it was official or...
Well, no, the OPCW actually came out today, the Executive Council did, I think it's today, with a statement continuing to support the December 31st deadline for removing the priority 1 chemicals from Syria. We're still obviously making progress. As we've talked about, these are milestones, right? That as long as we see forward progress, it's a very difficult process, and we just need to keep tracking towards these goals. The Executive Council meeting also sort of outlined more about the removal and destruction plan that's been identified by them. I'm happy to talk about that a little as well if people have questions on that. Yes, Syria?
Yes, one more. Do you have any idea about the relation between the Islamic Front and Saudi Arabia with Qatar?
I don't. I'm happy to ask our experts and see what the story is there. Anything else on Syria? Okay, go ahead.
Afghanistan. The chairman of Afghanistan's High Peace Council is here in town. Do you know what meeting he is having here?
Yes. Chair of the Afghan High Peace Council, Rabbani, is visiting Washington this week as part of regularly scheduled meetings in the United States. He has meetings scheduled with Special Representative for Afghanistan and Pakistan, Ambassador Jim Dobbins, and Ambassador at Large for Women's Issues, Kathy Russell. He's here to discuss a range of issues related to Afghan-led reconciliation process and the role of women in that process in an Afghan society.
Do you have any update on the BSA's signing?
No update. Our position hasn't changed on that. We clearly believe it's important to give the Afghan people the security of knowing that we have a BSA in place. We believe that President Karzai should sign it as soon as possible, and we'll keep working with him and his team.
Are you willing to wait till next president is elected?
No, we don't believe. We believe it should be signed as soon as possible, and we don't believe that would be a viable option. Every day that goes by that we don't sign it, there are costs to that, right? And certainly we need to do planning. Our NATO partners and allies need to do planning. The Afghan people need to do planning about what will happen after 2014. And it's hard to do that without a BSA in place, certainly.
I know zero option is not your preferred option, but when do you plan to start thinking of planning for the zero option if the BSA is? What is the deadline
the president is considering options right now about what our troop presence might look like. He hasn't made any decisions yet. Obviously, there's a range of options. And there's a range of factors that impact that decision. Obviously, when we have something to announce, we will. But I think it's clear that the BSA is important to get signed as soon as possible as part of that discussion, right? Because it affects how we plan and what different options look like in practice.
Recent phone calls by Secretary Kerry to President Karzai?
Not recently, no. I can check on the last time they spoke. But not recently, Lucas, yes, he's been. Are you just on Afghanistan?
Yeah.
So? Okay, sorry. Then Lucas, you're next.
Just to follow up on that, on Lalit's question, do you concede though that the signing of the BSA is likely to slip into the new year now, though?
We've said it needs to be as soon as possible. I don't want to put a hard and fast deadline. Obviously, what matters is getting it signed. And if that goes a little after the first of the year, then we'll deal with that, and we'll just keep encouraging him to sign it as soon as possible. We've been very clear that every day that goes on that it's not signed, we do incur some cost in terms of the uncertainty. And so we'll keep working with the Afghans to get it signed as soon as possible.
And in his interview with at the weekend, Secretary Kerry did say that there was a cut-off date that you guys have. He was asked whether there was a cut-off date by which it has to be signed.
I didn't see that comment. I'm happy to check.
He wouldn't specify, so I was going to ask you if you could specify for.
I will. I'll check and see if there's anything to add on that. Lucas.
Marie, on Benghazi, is it accurate that the Blue Mountain Libya group did not have a valid license to protect the mission?
No. They had a license.
Okay. Does Blue Mountain or any related entities hold other contracts, state or other entities?
Well, I can only speak for the State Department, as you know, and I think this is a question about local Guard programs, right? Obviously. And to my knowledge, State Department has no contracts with Blue Mountain Group for local Guard programs currently.
And so they did not have a contract at the time of the Benghazi
Currently,
attacks?
I said.
Okay.
Yeah. And they did have a license.
They did have a license on the day of the attacks?
Yep.
And
Catherine. Oh, sorry. Lucas, was there a follow-up? You sure? Okay. Catherine.
Can I ask you about Sochi?
Yes.
The delegation was announced yesterday, and previously First Lady Michelle Obama has headed the delegation, and Vice President Biden did so in Vancouver. And I was wondering, we don't have such a high-level representation going to Sochi, and if there's a maybe broader message that sends.
Well, the President and the First Lady's schedules don't allow them to travel to Sochi, as I think the White House has said. But in his stead, he's asked a high-level delegation led by former DHS Secretary Janet Napolitano and featuring a number of former Olympians to represent the United States government at the opening ceremonies. I'd also note that Deputy Secretary of State Burns will be heading the delegation at the closing ceremonies, along with some other folks as well. These delegations represent the diversity that is the U.S. All of our delegation members are distinguished by their accomplishments in government service, in sports and civic activism, and we're proud of them, think they'll be great ambassadors for the U.S. at the opening and closing ceremonies.
Was there any consideration given to Secretary Kerry going, either for the opening or closing?
Not to my knowledge. I'm happy to check. Not to my knowledge.
We know that this week, Japan, the Japanese cabinet approved National Defense Program guidelines and midterm defense program and also national security strategy.
Yep.
Does the U.S. Department pay attention to these issues?
Absolutely. We welcome Japan's adoption of a national security strategy and their revised national defense program guidelines. Our alliance with Japan, as I think I've said many times, is the cornerstone of peace, security, and prosperity in the Asia Pacific. We're pleased that both the strategies and guidelines contain language on strengthening the U.S.-Japan alliance. We think that's, of course, very important. And we'd also note Japan's outreach to explain its security policies, including by sending officials to other foreign capitals. We certainly appreciate Japan's efforts to be as transparent as it implements its evolving defense policies.
Because some experts say many people worry about both inside and outside Japan that the Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe hasn't really learned from the lesson from the wartime history and says that there's a kind of danger of rise of militarism in the long term. How do you see this kind of?
Well, I don't think I have any unique analysis to do on that. Again, we welcome Japan's adoption of this strategy and the guidelines, and we'll keep working together as very close allies and partners on a host of security and economic and other issues.
The Japanese will kind of boost military spending in the coming years. Do you think, to some extent, increase the regional tensions on this issue?
We welcome their adoption of this. I think I don't have much further analysis to do on it. I've seen some of that analysis out in the public, but our focus is on working very closely with Japan and other allies and partners in the region on a number of issues, whether it's stability on the Korean Peninsula, whether it's maritime security or other issues as well. Yes, go ahead.
Question on Sudan. With the airlift you announced at the
Yep.
earlier today and at the top of the briefing, do you expect more of those to happen as if the situation deteriorates, or how is this going to?
So, no, it's a good question. We are working to arrange for additional transportation as necessary to accommodate demand. I don't have anything to announce at this point, but certainly are open, working with the Defense Department or private contract aircraft to help other folks get out as well. As I mentioned, we evacuated U.S. officials, private U.S. citizens, foreign diplomats, some NGO folks, foreign private citizens. We're trying to help with get a wide range of folks out.
Do you know how many
And there are also commercial flights open. The airport is now open it for a limited amount of time, and there are commercial flights that are flying out. So that's sort of another way folks can get out as well.
Do you know how many U.S. diplomats still remain in, or U.S.
It's the emergency personnel. We don't give out official numbers on that, but we do have a contingency there that is focused on securing our facilities, on providing emergency services to U.S. citizens, and of course, reporting back here on the situation on the ground there.
In the travel or in the announcement of the two C-130s and the chartered aircraft, you said that they had taken chief of mission personnel. Is there some reason you didn't use the word embassy personnel?
A number of folks fall under chief of mission, right? Whether it's USAID or Department of Defense or other, a whole host of folks fall under chief of mission authority in a country, not just someone at the embassy.
Got it. So it's U.S. government officials generally. Thank you.
Yep.
And just on that, do you have an indication of, when you said according to need, have you any estimation of how many more people are wanting to get out?
We don't have good estimates of that. I would say that we evacuated approximately 150 private U.S. citizens as part of these evacuations. That is one number I'm able to give out. I attempt to whenever I can. I don't have a good sense for how much else there is.
The evacuation was actually higher than that then, because you...
Yeah, that was just private U.S. citizens.
Right.
There were 3 planes, U.S. officials, foreign diplomats, other folks as well.
Are you able to say which other countries the foreign diplomats
I
represented?
don't actually know. I'm happy to check. I know a number of other countries are also evacuating their folks.
So DoD used the number 120. So
for the planes?
Yeah.
For
the C-130s?
Well, I wasn't sure if they were.
Let me double check. That sounds accurate. I just need to double check.
They were only talking about 2 planes, so I was thinking it was
there are
just
2
120
planes.
on. So maybe there was another.
Right, there are 3 planes. There's the 2 Defense Department
Plus a
C-130s,
private charter.
and then the private charter that we chartered.
So what's the 150?
Those are the number of private U.S. citizens and a combination of all 3 planes that we evacuated.
These private U.S. citizens, have you any idea what do they do? Are they mainly business people?
I
Are
don't.
they scholars?
I don't have a breakdown
Are they
for that.
NGOs?
Some are NGOs. Some have dual citizenship. I just don't know. Yes, Michelle.
Is Washington playing any role in the reconciliation between President Kiir and his vice president?
Well, we're certainly encouraging, and I mentioned today that Ambassador Page met with President Kiir. We're certainly encouraging all folks to not move forward with violence, to take a step back here, and to work on addressing their issues they have peacefully. So we're certainly going to keep making that point very clear.
There's a group of African foreign ministers going to Juba soon. Do you expect anything from them?
I'll check on that. I wasn't aware of that trip, but I'm happy to check. Anything else on South Sudan? Yes? Well, I say anything else on South Sudan, you keep your hand raised. It's trickery.
Turkey?
Turkey, yes.
Ready? Okay.
It's a good way to get me to call on you. Yes, Turkey.
Trying.
Go ahead.
First of all, for the last 2 days, there have been arrests are going on.
Yes.
Some of them very close to AKP officials and ministers. What do you think is happening?
Well, we've seen the media reports of the arrests. I think it happened on the 17th of individuals in Turkey on alleged corruption charges. I'd refer you to the Turkish government, I think, for more information. We're obviously following the issue closely. We don't have a specific comment on these cases specifically. Obviously, we would reiterate that we expect Turkey to meet the highest standards for transparency, timeliness, and fairness in its judicial system. And if we have any more to share, I'm happy to.
So since these arrests started over dozens, maybe 50 people, today the Prime Minister fired about 50 or 60 police officers, I believe, chiefs, some of them. Do you think, or what do you have in reaction
Well,
to that?
again, we've seen these reports as well. We're following it closely. I don't have a specific comment on these cases. We're trying to get more information. If we do going forward, I'm happy to share it.
The part of the case is focusing on the Halkbank. It is a public bank which is dealing with the gold trades with the Iran and all those that. Do you still have any concerns regarding gold trade with Turkey and Iran?
I'm happy to check on the latest on that issue. I just don't know what our assessment is of that at the moment. Yes.
Earlier this week, the Ecuadorian authorities informed USAID that they were freezing cooperation with the agency.
Yes.
Could you confirm that and give us your reaction to the news, please?
Yes. The government of Ecuador did recently inform USAID that it could not execute any new assistance activities or extend existing activities pending negotiation of a new agreement governing bilateral assistance. Over the past 2 years, efforts have been made to renegotiate the bilateral agreements and country assistance agreement. Those have unfortunately been unsuccessful. As a result, USAID began incurring significant costs for 4 recently launched projects, which have been unable to proceed. Their cancellation was for us the only fiscally prudent option. I don't have anything to detail about where the process goes from here, but clearly it's an issue we're concerned about.
What were the projects? What were the 4 projects?
They were focused on environmental protection and strengthening of civil society.
And do you have any? How long has USAID been working in Ecuador? And do you have any figure, either annually or globally, for how much money has been invested in this way in the Ecuadorian economy?
I can check. I don't know how long they've been in Ecuador. I'm happy to check on that. I just don't have that in front of me.
And how does it affect?
I think for decades, but I'm happy to check.
Okay. And how does it affect the USAID AID workers who are there? Are you having to withdraw them all now?
Let me check on that. I'm not
And
sure
how many?
logistically what that looks like on the ground.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, Catherine.
Can I ask you about the Dominican Republic
Yes.
and Haiti? There was a recent ruling in the Dominican Republic which would strip citizens of Haitian descent of their DR citizenship. This recently, there were immigration talks going on that were being moderated by Venezuela, and this caused the breaking of them. Do you have a reaction to that ruling? And then also Venezuela announced that these talks may resume.
Okay, yeah, we've certainly seen the plan, I think that was in response to the ruling. We've conveyed our deep concern to the government of the Dominican Republic regarding the ruling's impact on the citizenship status of persons in the Dominican Republic, the majority of which, as you mentioned, are of Haitian descent. We've urged the government to continue close consultation with international partners and civil society to identify and expeditiously address in a humane way concerns regarding the plan's scope and reach to affected persons. So we'll continue the dialogue, but we have expressed our concerns over it.
Maria, did the United States government involved with Mr. Rodman's visit to North Korea?
Thought we were going to go a whole briefing without talking about Dennis Rodman. But no, did we talk to him? He hasn't contacted us about his trip. He has not.
The United States government was involved in
Involved?
his trip.
No.
Yeah, because he have kind of some message, government message bring to the...
No, he is not there representing the United States
Also,
government.
when he come back, he bring to Mr. Kenneth back, bring back.
I mean,
before
we've
the
certainly
Christmas
been
time.
very clear that the North Korean regime needs to release Kenneth Bae as soon as possible and allow him to return home. Our position on that has not changed. It's a very high priority.
I also have another question. Deputy Secretary Burns meeting with the South Korean
Yesterday, yes.
first Vice Foreign Minister. Do you have any detail on the meeting?
I do. I don't have it in here. I have someone email it to you after the briefing. I know they met and talked about a wide range of issues. Yes, Saeed.
Very quickly, on the designation of Fatah al-Islam as a terrorist organization, was there anything in particular that they have done at this
We
particular
released
time?
a media note outlining the designation. I don't have any further details on it than that. Yep, in the back, Michelle.
Egypt ousted the President Morsi to stand trial for espionage. Do you have anything on this?
Our position on this has not changed in any way. We remain concerned about politically motivated arrests and detentions in Egypt. We are continuing to look to the government to ensure that Egyptians are afforded due process with fair and transparent trials. That hasn't changed in any way.
Thank
yes.
Clarification. You said about the phone call that the U.S. diplomats should be allowed to do their duties. So
I said broadly speaking. Those are not the words Secretary Kerry used.
Oh, yes.
I'm using those.
Broadly speaking, but where does it come from? Do they feel that they are not being allowed to do their duties?
Well, we've all seen reports out there about potential, what might happen. We talked about the security at the embassy. There have been other reports out there about ID cards or other issues like that. Broadly speaking, we believe that the Indian government should continue to allow our diplomats on the ground, who are working very hard to advance the bilateral relationship, to do their jobs. And I think I'd probably leave it at that. Joe?
Can I ask you about a report that was in the Washington Post last night about a Russian national who was captured some time ago, I believe, and is being held near Bagram. He was captured fighting for the Taliban, and is now being held near Bagram. Apparently, the administration's thinking that of possibly putting him on trial before a military commission in the United States. Do you have anything on that?
I don't. I'd probably point you to other folks, including DOD, on this, but I don't have any additional information.
Would you not be obligated under things like the Vienna Convention to inform Russia if you're holding one of their nationals?
In general, the Defense Department and the State Department, in consultation with other relevant agencies, review third country national detainees to determine appropriate dispositions. That review, of course, continues. We talk about Afghanistan a lot when we talk about this. I don't have any additional information on that, but I'm happy to check with our
I don't have anything specific on this specific case.
I don't.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Deb, one last one?
Bolivia?
Yeah.
Do you have anything more on how he left the country and whether the United States was involved in this?
Yeah, I have a little more on this.
And
I got a little
also-
more clarity.
And also, have you talked to him by chance?
I haven't. I'm not aware if anyone here has. I'm happy to
Okay.
check. We were not involved in his departure from Bolivia. I would refer you to him for further details. He apparently, and again, I got a little more information on this, went through Peru. And consular officers in Peru provided consular assistance to him in making transportation arrangements to return to the U.S. And
Did they give him a passport? Did he have his passport?
I do not. I believe he did, but let me double check on that. I don't know. What I have here is that we assisted him in making transportation arrangements.
So is he not a fugitive?
From who?
Well,
From the
he was
Bolivians?
he was under house arrest or.
Again, we've been in frequent contact with Bolivian officials about this. I don't have any update on that for you or classification of what his status is. I just can confirm he's back in the U.S.
Have they made an extradition request?
Yesterday, to my knowledge, the answer was no. I have no reason to believe that's changed, but I can double check.
And I had one more on Colombia, actually. Sorry for South America Day.
I know.
Apparently, the Colombian press is reporting that the anti-coca spraying in Colombia has been halted after a couple of pilots were shot down by FARC rebels. Is that something
that the Colombian government does?
I believe so, yes.
I'll check. I haven't
Yeah.
heard that. I can check. Yes. Thank you, everyone.